Chapter 1. The cabin in the hollow cabin had been abandoned for years, but it still had a door that latched and windows that kept out the wind. That was enough. Eleanor pressed her palm against the splintered wood frame and told herself this was temporary just until the scandal died down. Just until the whispers stopped following her through town like hungry dogs. She'd left London 3 nights ago with nothing but a worn valise and the dress on her back. Her sister's husband had seen to it that her name was ruined, her position lost, her future ash. He'd lied with such practiced ease that even Eleanor's own sister had looked at her with cold, uncertain eyes. So she'd run. Not toward anything. Just away. The cabin squatted in a hollow between 2 hills, hidden from the road by a curtain of black pines. The locals wouldn't come near it. They said it belonged to the old estate, the one no one spoke of except in nervous, sidelong references. Eleanor had heard the stories. Blood debts, vanished servants, lights in the windows when no one should be home. She'd dismissed them as village superstition. Now, standing in the gathering dusk, with the trees pressing close and the sky bleeding red through the branches, she wondered if she'd been too hasty. Inside, the air smelled of dust and dry rot. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its hearth cold and swept clean. She found a chair with 3 good legs, a table carved with initials she couldn't read, and a narrow bed frame stripped bare. No mirrors. That struck her as odd, but she was too tired to question it. She set down her valise and began unpacking with numb efficiency. Candles, matches, a loaf of bread already going stale, a tin of tea, a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender. These were the remnants of her old life, and they felt pitifully small. The first candle sputtered to life, throwing shadows across the walls. Eleanor wrapped herself in the blanket and sat by the cold hearth, listening to the wind test the shutters. Alone. Felt different here. In London, alone had meant invisible. Here, alone felt watched. She must have dozed. Because when she opened her eyes, the candle had burned low and something was moving outside, not the wind. Footsteps. Eleanor's heart kicked hard against her ribs. She stood slowly, the blanket sliding from her shoulders. The footsteps circled the cabin, deliberate, unhurried, testing. Then they stopped at the door. 3 slow knocks. "I know you're in there." The voice was male, low, and impossibly calm. "Open the door." Eleanor's mouth went dry. "This cabin is occupied. Move along." A pause. Then, quieter, almost amused. "You don't want me to move along." "Not with what's coming behind me." Before she could answer, something crashed through the trees, something fast and snarling and wrong. The door shuddered under a sudden, vicious impact. Wood splintered. The latch held barely. "Open the door," the man said again, and this time there was an edge beneath the calm. Now, Eleanor lunged forward and threw the bolt. The door swung inward, and a figure stepped across the threshold with the fluid grace of something that had never stumbled in its life. He was tall, dark-haired, and unnervingly still. His coat was torn at the shoulder, stained with something that looked black in the candlelight. His eyes found hers, pale gray, cold as winter sky, and she felt the impact of that gaze like a hand closing around her throat. Behind him, something howled. He turned, placing himself between Eleanor and the doorway. "Stay inside. Don't cross the threshold." "What is that?" "Stay inside." The thing that lunged out of the darkness was not a wolf. It was too large to wrong, its eyes burning red and its teeth too many. It hit the man like a battering ram, and they went down together in a tangle of claws and fury. Eleanor stumbled back, her breath coming in short, shocked gasps. The man moved with impossible speed, twisting beneath the creature's weight and driving something bright, a blade, up into its ribs. The creature screamed, a sound that scraped against her skull. And then it was thrashing, convulsing, dissolving into black smoke that the wind tore apart. Silence crashed down. The man stood slowly, breathing hard. Blood ran down his arm, soaking into the sleeve of his coat. He looked at Eleanor, and for a moment she saw something flicker across his face, something almost like regret. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "Neither should you." Her voice shook, but she forced herself to meet his eyes. What was that thing? A revenant, blood mad, sent to hunt. He glanced at the door, then back at her. "This cabin is marked, protected. They can't cross the threshold without invitation." A pause. "Neither can I." Eleanor's pulse hammered in her ears. "What are you?" He tilted his head, studying her with that unnerving stillness. "The thing keeping you alive tonight." He turned toward the trees, then stopped. "Lock the door. Don't open it again, no matter what you hear. If I survive the next hour, I'll return at dawn. If I don't." He met her eyes one last time. "Pray you reach the village before they find you." Then he was gone, swallowed by the dark. Eleanor stood frozen, her hand pressed to her chest. Her heart was racing, her thoughts spinning. She moved to the door on legs that felt like water and pushed it shut. The latch clicked into place. Outside, something screamed. She sank to the floor, pulled her knees to her chest, and waited for morning. Chapter 2. The wounded stranger. Dawn came slowly, bleeding gray light through the gaps in the shutters. Eleanor hadn't slept. She'd spent the hours curled against the wall, listening to the sounds beyond the door, crashes, inhuman shrieks, and once, a roar that shook dust from the rafters. Then, silence. She waited, counting her heartbeats, until the quality of the quiet changed. Morning birds began to sing. The oppressive weight that had pressed against the cabin walls lifted, just slightly. 3 soft knocks at the door. Eleanor rose on stiff legs, her muscles protesting. She approached the door carefully, pressing her ear against the wood. Who's there? Still alive? The voice was rough, strained. For now. She unlatched the door and pulled it open. He stood on the threshold, swaying slightly. The coat was shredded now, hanging in dark strips. His shirt was torn open, revealing pale skin marked with cuts that should have been mortal, deep gashes across his ribs. A puncture wound near his collarbone. But the blood had already stopped flowing, the edges of the wounds knitting together even as she watched. His gray eyes met hers, and she saw exhaustion there, something almost human. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. Eleanor's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed that inviting him inside was dangerous, foolish. But he'd fought for her last night. He'd placed himself between her and whatever those things were. "Yes," she whispered. He crossed the threshold, and immediately his legs gave out. Eleanor lunged forward, catching him before he hit the floor. He was heavier than he looked, solid muscle and cold skin. She half dragged, half guided him to the chair, and he collapsed into it with a sharp exhale. "You're freezing," she said, her hands still on his shoulders. "Always am." He leaned his head back, eyes closing. "It's the nature of the curse." Eleanor stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. In the pale morning light, she could see him clearly now. Sharp features, dark hair falling across his forehead, the kind of face that belonged in old portraits, beautiful in a way that didn't feel entirely safe. "What are you?" she asked again. His eyes opened, fixing on her. "You already know, or you wouldn't have let me in. I know what the stories say, but stories aren't real, aren't they?" A faint, bitter smile touched his mouth. "I'm Lucian Ashford, 3rd son of House Ashford, sworn to the Night Court for 243 years. I'm what your village warns children about. I'm what shouldn't exist." He gestured to himself, to the wounds still slowly healing. And yet, Eleanor's hands trembled. She pressed them flat against her skirt. "Vampire." Yes, the word hung between them, heavy as stone. She should run, scream, something. Instead, she found herself asking, "Why did you help me?" Lucian studied her for a long moment. "This cabin belongs to my house. Has for a century. It's warded, protected by old magic. Revenants can't cross the threshold uninvited. But a human living here." He tilted his head. "That's unusual. Dangerous. I didn't know. I gathered that." He shifted, wincing as his wounds pulled. "What's your name?" "Eleanor Hartley." "Well, Eleanor Hartley, you've stumbled into the middle of a war you don't understand. House Corvin has been hunting me for weeks. Those revenants were theirs, sent to track me down." His expression darkened. "Now they know about this place. About you." Cold fear trickled down her spine. "What do they want?" "Me dead. Anyone sheltering me dead." He met her eyes steadily. "You should leave at first light tomorrow. Go back to wherever you came from." "I can't." The words came out sharper than she intended. "I have nothing to go back to." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of recognition, perhaps understanding. "What are you running from? Does it matter?" "It might. If you're staying." Eleanor turned away, moving to the window. Through the gap in the shutters, she could see the pine trees standing like sentinels. "My brother-in-law ruined me, destroyed my reputation, took my position. My own sister believed his lies." Her voice went flat. "So I left. This was the only place I could afford, that no one would look for me." Silence stretched behind her. Then quietly, "I'm sorry." She turned back, surprised. Lucian was watching her with something that looked almost like empathy in those pale eyes. "Why?" she asked. "You don't know me. I know what it's like to lose everything because of someone else's choices." He looked down at his hands, flexing them slowly. "To be cast out of the life you knew." Eleanor moved closer, her curiosity overriding her fear. "Is that what happened to you?" In a manner of speaking, his jaw tightened. "Being turned isn't a gift, no matter what the stories say. It's a theft." Your life, your choices, your future all taken in a single moment. He looked up at her. I didn't choose this. None of us do. The raw honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She'd expected a monster. Instead, she found something wounded and weary and unexpectedly real. The wounds, she said, nodding to his chest. Will they heal? Eventually. Faster if I feed. But, he shook his head. I won't ask that of you. Why not? Isn't that what vampires do? What we do and what we should do aren't always the same thing. His eyes held hers. Feeding requires consent. Always, it's the first law of the night court. The one thing all houses agree on. To take blood by force is to become revenant, mindless, blood mad, lost. His expression hardened. I'd rather die than become that. Eleanor absorbed this, her mind turning over these new rules, this strange honor code. How long can you go without? Weeks, months if necessary. It's not pleasant, but I'll manage. She nodded slowly, then moved to her valise. I have bandages and water. Let me clean those wounds at least. Eleanor, you saved my life last night. She pulled out the supplies, her hands steadier now. Let me do this. For a moment, he looked like he might argue. Then he simply nodded, exhaustion winning out over pride. As Eleanor approached with the water and cloth, she realized she'd made a choice, perhaps a foolish one. She was staying with him, at least for now. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Chapter 3. Shadows and suspicion. Eleanor had tended wounds before. Her mother had been sick for years, and Eleanor had learned to be gentle with suffering. But this was different. Lucien's skin was marble cold beneath her fingertips, and the wounds themselves seemed to shimmer at the edges. As if reality couldn't quite decide whether they should exist, she worked in silence, cleaning away the dried blood with careful strokes. He sat perfectly still, watching her with an intensity that made her self-conscious. You're not afraid, he said finally. I'm terrified. She didn't look up from her task. But fear doesn't make the bleeding stop. A soft sound, almost a laugh. Practical, necessary. She finished with the largest gash, and sat back. These should have killed you. They would have once. Before. His eyes grew distant. You stop remembering what pain used to mean. It becomes just sensation, temporary. Eleanor studied his face, the weariness etched there. How old are you? Really? 26 when I was turned. 269 now. He met her gaze. Does that frighten you? Everything about this frightens me, she began, gathering the bloodied cloths. But you're still here. Still, you. That's something. The day passed in strange, suspended quiet. Lucien moved to the darkest corner of the cabin, away from the thin streams of sunlight that crept through the shutters. Eleanor noticed how he positioned himself, always in shadow, always watching the windows with wary alertness. Does sunlight hurt you? She asked, breaking the silence. Not hurt, weakens. He flexed his hand, studying it. Like trying to move through water. Everything becomes slower, heavier. At noon, I can barely stay conscious. So you sleep during the day? When I can. His smile was faint. Hard to rest when you're being hunted. Eleanor busied herself with small tasks, organizing her meager supplies, sweeping dust from the corners, anything to keep her hands occupied. But she found her attention drifting back to him, cataloging the strangeness. He didn't breathe regularly, only taking air when he spoke. His eyes never blinked unless he seemed to remember to. And once, when a bird struck the window, he'd moved with such speed that she'd barely seen him cross the room. Inhuman. The words sat heavy in her chest. As afternoon shadows lengthened, she built a small fire in the hearth. The warmth felt good, normal. She made tea from her dwindling supplies and cradled the cup in her hands. You're staring, Lucien said, without opening his eyes. Eleanor flushed. I'm trying to understand. What's to understand? I'm dead. I drink blood. I'll outlive everyone you know. His tone was flat, almost bitter. It's simple. Nothing about you seems simple. She took a sip of tea. You speak of honor and consent. You fight revenants. You apologize. She paused. Monsters don't apologize. His eyes opened, fixing on her with sudden intensity. Don't romanticize this, Eleanor. I've killed. I've taken lives to sustain my own. The fact that I follow rules doesn't make me good, it just makes me controlled. Who did you kill? The question hung in the air. She hadn't meant to ask it, but now it was out there, raw and unavoidable. Lucien was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, soldiers mostly, men who'd already chosen violence, House Corvin's assassins. Once, a man who was beating his wife to death in an alley. His jaw tightened. I told myself I was serving justice. Maybe I was. Maybe I just wanted to feel righteous while I fed. Eleanor absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. Do you regret it? Some of it. Not all. He looked at her steadily. Does that make you want to run? She considered. She should want to run. Everything rational screamed at her to leave. But sitting here in the firelight, watching this ancient, dangerous creature struggle with his own conscience, she found she couldn't. No, she said quietly. It makes you honest. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps even relief. You're strange, Eleanor Hartley. So I've been told. Night fell like a curtain dropping. The moment the last sunlight faded, Lucian seemed to come alive, his movements sharper, his presence somehow more solid. He moved to the window, peering through the shutters at the darkness beyond. They'll come again, he said. Tonight or tomorrow. House Corvin doesn't give up. Eleanor joined him at the window, staying carefully behind his shoulder. Why are they hunting you? I broke an oath. His voice went hard. House Ashford made an alliance with House Corvin 50 years ago. A blood pact unbreakable by vampire law. But the terms were ugly. They wanted permission to hunt in Ashford territory, to take humans without the consent laws. He turned to face her. I refused to honor it. Went before the Night Court and challenged the pact's validity. What happened? The court sided with tradition, said the pact was binding. His hands curled into fists. So I walked away, broke my house, TIs, became rogue, a bitter smile. They've been hunting me ever since. Eleanor's throat tightened. You gave up everything. I gave up participating in evil. There's a difference. He looked back at the darkness. But now you're caught in it. That's my fault. I chose to stay. You don't know what you're choosing. Then tell me. She moved closer, meeting his eyes. If we're in this together, I need to know what's coming. Lucian studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in his gaze. Then he nodded slowly. House Corvin won't stop with revenants. They'll send their sworn vampires next, older, stronger, smarter. They'll surround this place and wait us out. He paused. And when they come, they won't just want me. They'll want to make an example, which means anyone sheltering me dies too. Fear shot through her, cold and clarifying. How long do we have? A day. Maybe two. Eleanor swallowed hard. Then we need a plan. For the first time since dawn, Lucian smiled, really smiled. We, she said firmly. Chapter 4. Threads of Trust. They spent the night planning by candlelight. Though Eleanor suspected Lucian could see perfectly well in the dark, he sketched a rough map of the hollow in the dust on the table, the cabin, the surrounding pines, the narrow road that led back toward the village. The wards only protect the threshold, he explained, tracing the cabin's outline. Beyond the door, we're vulnerable. They'll try to draw us out, or wait until you need supplies. His finger tapped the road. This is the kill zone, too exposed. Eleanor studied the map, her mind working. What if we didn't run? What if we made them come to us on our terms? Lucian looked up sharply. You can't fight vampires, Eleanor. No, but I can think like a human, which they've forgotten how to do. She leaned forward. You said the wards protect the threshold. What about the windows? Same principle. They'd need an invitation to cross. But objects don't need invitations. She met his eyes. Fire doesn't need permission. Understanding flickered across his face. You want to set a perimeter. I want to make approaching this cabin costly. She stood, moving to her valise. I have lamp oil. Not much, but enough. If we can funnel them to a single approach point, make the others too dangerous, they'll still have numbers. But his tone had shifted, considering rather than dismissing. Numbers only matter if they can use them. Eleanor pulled out the small bottle of oil. You know how they think. I know how to be underestimated. Together, we might survive long enough to escape. Lucian rose, and she noticed how gracefully he moved now, all the daylight sluggishness gone. It's not a bad plan. Better than anything I'd considered. You were just going to fight them head on, weren't you? A faint smile. It's worked before. How many times have you nearly died? His smile faded. More than I'd like to admit. They worked through the small hours, Eleanor's practical suggestions meshing with Lucian's knowledge of vampire tactics. He explained their weaknesses: not sunlight or crosses or garlic. Those were human fantasies, but decapitation, fire, and the removal of the heart. Vampires were hard to kill, but not impossible. We're ambush predators by nature, he said, watching her sketch modifications to their plan. Patient. Most humans panic, make mistakes. But you. He tilted his head. You think clearly under pressure. I learned to. Eleanor kept her eyes on the map. When my mother was dying, panic helped no one. You learned to section off fear, to use it rather than let it use you. Is that what you're doing now? Sectioning off fear? She looked up, meeting his steady gaze. I'm choosing to trust you. That's different. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps. Two people who'd been cast out, who'd learned to survive in the margins, finding unexpected solidarity in a shadowy cabin while death circled outside. Lucien broke eye contact first, turning toward the window. You should rest. Dawn isn't far. What about you? I'll keep watch. I don't tire the way you do. Eleanor hesitated, then moved to the narrow bed. She lay down fully clothed, pulling the thin blanket over herself. But sleep felt impossible with him standing guard, with danger pressing close. Lucien? Her voice was soft in the darkness. Yes, when you broke from your house, was there anyone you had to leave behind? Silence stretched. Then, my brother, Kieran. He understood why I did it, but he couldn't follow. He had responsibilities. TIs. I didn't. His voice went rough. I haven't seen him in 30 years. Don't know if I ever will again. I'm sorry. Don't be. He's safer without me. A pause. What about you? Your sister, do you miss her? Eleanor stared at the ceiling, her chest tight. I miss who I thought she was. The sister who used to braid my hair and tell me stories. But that person, I don't think she exists anymore. Maybe she never did. Betrayal changes how we remember people. Yes. She closed her eyes. It does. She must have dozed despite herself, because when she opened her eyes again, pale light was seeping through the shutters, and Lucien was sitting in the chair, his head tilted back, eyes closed. For a moment, she studied him, the sharp lines of his face, the stillness that wasn't quite sleep, the vulnerability that came with daylight weakness. Beautiful and terrible, she thought. Like a sword, she rose quietly and moved to check their meager food supplies. The bread was nearly gone, the tea almost out. They'd need provisions soon, which meant risk. I can hear you thinking. Lucien's voice was drowsy, slower than usual. We need food. Water. Tomorrow night. I'll go. They'll be watching for you. Better me than you. His eyes opened to slits. I can move faster. Fight if necessary. Eleanor crossed her arms. And if they capture you, then you run. Take the north path through the pines. Don't stop until you reach the village. I'm not leaving you. Eleanor, I said no. She moved closer, surprising herself with her vehemence. We're in this together. You don't get to make sacrifices alone. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression, surprise giving way to something warmer, almost tender. You're stubborn. I've been called worse. I'm sure you have. He smiled slightly. All right, we'll find another way. The day passed in careful preparation. They couldn't do much in daylight, with Lucien weakened, but Eleanor worked on sharpening. What few tools they had: a rusted knife, a broken chair leg that could serve as a stake. Her hands remembered the motions from her mother's sickroom, purposeful, steady, refusing to shake. Lucien watched her work, occasionally offering quiet suggestions. Once, their hands brushed as she passed him the knife to test its edge, and she felt the shock of his cold skin against hers. He pulled back immediately, apologetic. Sorry, I forget how cold I am. It's all right. And strangely it was. The cold didn't repel her anymore. It was just part of what he was different. Not monstrous. As evening fell and strength returned to him, Lucien stood and stretched. Tonight we set the perimeter. Tomorrow night, they'll likely come. He looked at her, his gray eyes serious. Are you ready? Eleanor thought of London, of her sister's cold eyes, of running with nowhere to go. Then she thought of this standing. Her ground, choosing her allies, fighting for something that mattered. Yes, she said, I'm ready. Chapter 5. The gathering storm. They worked under cover of darkness, moving through the pines with Eleanor following Lucien's lead. He moved like smoke through the trees, silent and sure, while she picked her way more carefully over roots and fallen branches. The forest pressed close, watching. Here, Lucien said, stopping at a natural choke point where the trees narrowed toward the cabin. This is where they'll approach. Pride won't let them scatter. They'll want to arrive together. Make a show of force. Eleanor uncorked the lamp oil, her hands steady despite her racing heart. How many? 4, maybe 5. House Corvin won't risk more than that. Too much attention from the night court if they send a full hunting party. He knelt, examining the ground. But 4 is enough. More than enough. She poured the oil in a careful line across the narrow path, then scattered dry pine needles and broken branches over it. In darkness, it would look like natural forest debris. One spark, and it would become a wall of flame. Won't they smell it? She asked. Vampire senses are sharp, but not infallible. The pine resin will mask most of it. He watched her work with something like approval. You're good at this. At setting traps? She moved to the next position he'd marked, at adapting. Most humans freeze when they learn what we are. You're different. Eleanor paused, looking up at him through the darkness. Maybe I've already lost enough that there's nothing left to freeze for. Fear requires having something to protect. You're protecting your life, am I? The words came out more bitter than she intended. What life? The one where I'm ruined and alone. Where my own family betrayed me. She shook her head. At least here, I'm choosing my battles. Lucian was quiet for a moment, then moved closer. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. Glad you stayed. His voice dropped. I've been alone for a long time. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone fight beside me. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and unexpected. Eleanor felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the physical and everything to do with recognition. I'm glad too, she said. Softly, they finished the perimeter as midnight approached. 3 fire lines at strategic points, forcing any approach toward the cabin's front door, where the wards were strongest. It wasn't perfect, but it gave them a chance. As they walked back to the cabin, Eleanor became acutely aware of Lucian beside her, the economical grace of his movements, the way he positioned himself between her and the deeper shadows. Protective even now. Tell me about the night court, she said, partly to distract herself from the growing tension. You mentioned it before. It's the governing body of vampire society. Representatives from all the major houses meet to settle disputes, enforce laws, maintain the balance. He held a branch back so she could pass. Or that's the theory. In practice, it's politics and power plays, and ancient grudges dressed up as justice. But there are rules. The consent law you mentioned. Yes, created after the Revenant Wars, 3 centuries ago. Too many vampires were turning humans indiscriminately, creating armies of blood-mad monsters. It nearly exposed us all. His expression darkened. The consent law was meant to prevent that. No feeding without willing permission, no turning without explicit agreement. Break it, and you become what you created. Revenant. Eleanor shivered. That's what those creatures were. Vampires who broke the law. Vampires who became something less. No thought, no control, just endless hunger. He looked at her. It's the one fate we all fear. Losing ourselves completely. They reached the cabin, and Lucian paused at the threshold, his head tilted as if listening. Something's wrong. Eleanor's pulse spiked. What? It's too quiet. The night birds stopped singing. His eyes scanned the tree line. They're already here, watching. Ice flooded Eleanor's veins. How many? I can't tell yet, but we need to get inside, now. They crossed the threshold together, and Lucian barred the door, his movements swift and certain. Eleanor moved to the window, peering through the shutters. At first she saw nothing, just darkness and trees and shadow. Then something moved. A figure stepped from between the pines, tall and elegant in dark clothing. Even from a distance, Eleanor could see the predatory grace, the inhuman stillness. The figure was joined by another, then another. 4 in total, spreading out in a loose semicircle around the cabin. House Corvin, Lucian said quietly, standing beside her. Right on schedule. The lead figure, a woman with pale hair that seemed to glow in the darkness, stepped forward until she stood just beyond the fire line Eleanor had set. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the night. Lucian Ashford, Oathbreaker, Rogue. She smiled, all teeth. You've led us on quite the chase. Lucian opened the shutter slightly. Lady Corvin, how kind of you to visit. Still clinging to civility. How quaint. Her eyes swept to the cabin, and Eleanor felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing. And you've taken a pet. How unexpected. Eleanor's jaw tightened, but Lucian touched her arm gently, a warning to stay silent. She's under my protection, Lucian said. Which means she's under the protection of the threshold wards. You know the laws, Margot. I know you've broken every law that matters. The woman Margot circled slowly, studying the cabin. The night court has issued your execution order. You have no protections left. No house. No sanctuary. The wards say otherwise. Wards can be broken. Or you can simply be starved out. Margot stopped, facing them directly. How long can you last, I wonder? Days? Weeks? How long before your pet human needs food, water, supplies? Her smile widened. We can wait, Lucian. We're very patient. And when you finally emerge, you'll find I'm not as easy to kill as you think. Oh, I don't think it will be easy. Margot's eyes gleamed. I think it will be delightful. She turned, gesturing to her companions. They melted back into the trees, but Eleanor knew they hadn't left. They were out there watching, waiting. Lucian closed the shutter and turned to face Eleanor. In the dim candlelight, His expression was grim. They'll wait until we have no choice but to leave. Then they'll strike. Eleanor's mind raced. How long can you go without feeding? Longer than you can go without food or water. He moved to the table, bracing his hands against it. I won't let you starve because of me. Then we don't wait. Eleanor joined him at the table. We make them come to us. Tonight, while we're still strong. Eleanor, that's suicide. No, it's strategy. She leaned forward, her voice urgent. They're expecting us to be afraid, to hide. What if we don't? What if we use their assumptions against them? Lucian stared at her, and she saw the moment calculation replace concern in his eyes. You want to bait them. I want to end this. On our terms. She held his gaze. Can we do it? He was silent for a long moment, weighing options, calculating odds. Finally, he nodded slowly. Maybe, if we're very clever and very lucky. He looked at her steadily. And if you're willing to trust me completely. Eleanor thought of London, of running, of safety. That was just another cage. Then she thought of standing here, choosing danger over surrender. Fighting beside someone who saw her as an equal rather than a burden. I trust you, she said. Then let's give House Corvin something they'll never expect. A fierce smile crossed his face. A fight they can't win. Chapter 6. Blood and Revelation. Plan was simple, which made it terrifying. Lucian would draw them in close, make them confident. Eleanor would provide the spark literally. You understand what I'm asking you to do? Lucian stood before her, his gray eyes searching hers. Once you light the fire, there's no going back. They'll know you're not just sheltering me, you're fighting with me. Good. Eleanor checked the makeshift torch she'd wrapped cloth soaked in lamp oil tied around a chair leg. Let them know. He reached out, his cold fingers, brushing her cheek with unexpected gentleness. You're braver than you think. I'm terrified, she admitted. But terror and courage aren't opposites, are they? No, he said softly. They're not. Outside, the night had grown still, that predatory stillness that meant hunters were circling. Lucian moved to the door, his posture shifting into something lethal and fluid. Eleanor had seen him exhausted, wounded, vulnerable. Now she saw what he truly was when roused, apex predator, ancient and deadly. Remember, he said, without looking back. Stay inside the threshold until I signal. Don't cross until the fire's lit. I remember. He opened the door and stepped into the darkness. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Margot's voice drifted through the trees, amused and cruel. Come to surrender, Lucian? How disappointing. I hoped you'd have more fight in you. I'm done running. Lucian moved away from the cabin, into the clearing. You want me? Come and take me. Eleanor watched through the gap in the shutters, her heart hammering. She could see 3 of them now, Margot and 2 others. A man with dark hair and another woman with eyes that caught the moonlight like a cat's. The 4th was somewhere in the shadows. Flanking, they circled Lucian with the confidence of wolves cornering wounded prey. Margot smiled, showing too many teeth. Brave words from someone who stands alone. I've stood alone for 30 years. I'm quite good at it. The dark-haired man lunged first, faster than Eleanor could track. But Lucian was faster, sidestepping and driving his elbow into the vampire's spine with bone-cracking force. The vampire stumbled, hissing. That's for Marcus, Lucian said coldly. The human you killed in Bristol. Margot's smile faded. You've been keeping a list? A very long list. They attacked together, then 3-on-1 in a blur of inhuman speed. Eleanor lost track of individual movements, seeing only the violent dance of predators. Lucian held his own, but she could see him being driven back, away from the cabin, away from the fire lines. The 4th vampire emerged from the shadows behind her. Eleanor spun, her breath catching. He stood just beyond the threshold, young-looking, with blonde hair and dead eyes. He smiled at her slowly. Clever little human, he said. Did you really think we wouldn't notice your fire trap? Her hand tightened on the torch. Stay back. Can't cross the threshold without invitation. I know. He tilted his head. But you can't stay in there forever. And when you come out, he drew a finger across his throat, still smiling. Eleanor's mind raced. If they knew about the fire lines, the plan was already compromised. She looked toward the clearing where Lucian was fighting, saw him take a vicious blow to the ribs that would have killed a human. He went down on one knee. And no more waiting. She struck the flint, and the torch blazed to life. The vampire at the threshold recoiled from the sudden light, and Eleanor ran not out the door, but to the window. She smashed through the shutters and threw the torch in a high arc toward the nearest fire line. It landed perfectly. Flames erupted across the oil-soaked path with a roar that shook the night. The blonde vampire screamed, his planned approach suddenly cut off by a wall of fire. Margot whirled, her expression twisting with rage as she realized what Eleanor had done, kill the human. She snarled, but Lucien was already moving. He caught the dark-haired vampire by the throat and twisted with terrible efficiency. The vampire's head came free with a sound Eleanor would never forget, wet and final. The body collapsed into ash. "Run, Eleanor," Lucien shouted. She grabbed the second torch and bolted through the door, racing for the next fire line. The cat-eyed woman intercepted her, moving with serpent speed. Eleanor swung the torch wildly, and the vampire jerked back, hissing. "Filthy human!" Lucien slammed into the woman from the side, driving her into a tree with crushing force. "Don't touch her!" Eleanor reached the second line and lit it. More flames erupted, hemming in Margot and the blonde vampire, forcing them toward the cabin where the wards held strongest. Margot's face was no longer beautiful, it was a mask of fury and hatred. "You think fire will save you? We are House Corvin. We are predictable," Lucien finished. He stood beside Eleanor now, bloodied but unbowed. "You always were, Margot. Too proud to see the trap until you're caught in it." The flames burned higher, and in their light, Eleanor saw something she'd missed before. Lucien wasn't just wounded, he was weakening. The fight had cost him too much, and without feeding, he couldn't sustain it. He swayed slightly, and she caught his arm. His skin was ice cold, his breathing shallow. "Lucien, I'm fine," he said, but his voice was strained. Margot saw it too. Her smile returned, sharp and knowing. "You're starving. How long has it been since you fed, Lucien?" "Weeks, months." She laughed. "You can't win this. You're already dying." Eleanor felt Lucien's weight lean more heavily against her. He was failing. The cat-eyed woman rose from where Lucien had thrown her, movements predatory despite her injuries. The blonde vampire circled the flames, looking for an opening. Margot stood calm and patient, a general, watching her enemy crumble. "Last chance," Margot said. "Surrender now, and I'll make the human's death quick." Eleanor's mind worked frantically. They couldn't fight anymore, Lucien was too weak. They couldn't run, they were surrounded. There was only one option left, one thing she could offer that might change the balance. "No," Eleanor said clearly. She turned to Lucien, meeting his startled gray eyes. "Feed from me, Eleanor." "No, you said it requires consent." "I'm giving it." She pulled back her collar, exposing her throat. "Take what you need. Fight for us." "I can't ask, you're not asking. I'm offering." She touched his face, feeling the cold marble of his skin. "I trust you. Now trust me." For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then his eyes shifted, still gray, but with something ancient and hungry flickering behind them. "You're certain?" "Yes." He pulled her close, one arm around her waist, the other cradling her head with unexpected tenderness. "This will hurt," he whispered, against her skin. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just live." His fangs pierced her throat, pain sharp and bright, then something else. Warmth spreading through her veins like wine, like fire, like falling into darkness that welcomed instead of frightened. She felt his presence in that darkness, felt the echo of his thoughts, his gratitude, his desperate need held in careful check. He drank, and she gave, and somewhere in that exchange, something fundamental shifted between them. When he pulled back, his eyes were clear and bright, power thrumming through him once more. He laid her gently on the ground, pressing his hand to the wound until it stopped bleeding. "Stay here," he said, and his voice was different, now stronger, colder, deadly. Then he turned to face House Corvin, and Eleanor saw what a vampire truly was when fed and furious. Margot's smile faltered. "Now," Lucien said softly, "let's finish this." Chapter 7. The battle in the hollow. Eleanor's vision swam, the world tilting sideways as she pressed her hand to her throat. The wound had stopped bleeding, but she felt hollowed out, lighter somehow. Through the haze, she watched Lucien move. He was transformed. Where before he'd been controlled, measured, now he was pure, lethal grace, a predator fully unleashed. He crossed the distance to the cat-eyed woman in a blur and struck with devastating precision. She tried to dodge, but he anticipated, catching her wrist and snapping it backward with a crack that echoed through the hollow. The woman shrieked, stumbling into the flames. Fire caught her clothing, and she panicked, the ancient vampire instinct overriding strategy. She ran, thrashing, and disappeared screaming into the forest. To down. 3 to go. The blonde vampire rushed Lucien from behind, but Lucien spun, using the attacker's momentum against him. They collided in a tangle of fists and fangs, moving too fast for Eleanor's dazed mind to follow. She heard the impact of bodies against trees, heard snarling that sounded more animal than human. Margot remained outside the fire ring, watching with calculating eyes. She wasn't afraid, not yet. She was waiting for an opening, for Lucien to make a mistake. Eleanor forced herself to her knees, then to her feet. The world swayed dangerously, but she gripped the cabin wall and steadied herself. She had one torch left, and her mind was clearing enough to think. Lucien had the blonde vampire pinned against a tree, his hand around the other's throat. "Tell your mistress," he said, his voice deadly calm, "that House Ashford remembers. That justice delayed is not justice denied. There is no House Ashford anymore." The blonde vampire choked out. "Your brother?" Lucien's grip tightened. "What about my brother? Dead 6 months ago. Corvin saw to it." The vampire smiled through his pain. "You're the last of your line, rogue. And when you die, Ashford dies with you." Something broken. Lucien's expression, a flash of raw anguish quickly buried under cold fury. His hand twisted, and the blonde vampire's head separated from his shoulders. Ash scattered on the wind. Margot finally moved. She flowed across the fire line with impossible grace, the flames licking at her coat but not catching. Old vampire, Eleanor realized dimly. Old enough that fire only slowed her, didn't stop her. She reached Lucien while he was still reeling from the revelation about his brother and struck him across the face with enough force to send him crashing into the cabin wall. Wood splintered under the impact. "Did you really think we'd leave loose ends?" Margot purred, stalking toward him. "Your brother was a fool for protecting you. He died begging us to spare you." It was pathetic. Lucien pushed himself up, blood dark and viscous running from his mouth. "Kieran is ash and memory, as you will be." She lunged, and Lucien met her strike for strike. They were more evenly matched than the others. Margot was older, but Lucien was faster, fueled by grief and rage and Eleanor's blood singing through his veins. They tore at each other with savage intensity, every blow potentially fatal. Eleanor watched, helpless, as they destroyed the clearing around them. A tree cracked and fell. The cabin wall shook from repeated impacts. Blood black in the firelight spattered the ground. Then Margot landed a vicious strike to Lucien's wounded ribs from earlier. He gasped, his guard dropping for just a second. Margot drove her hand toward his chest, fingers extended like claws, going for his heart. Eleanor moved without thinking. She grabbed the final torch, struck it alight, and threw it directly at Margot. It hit the vampire in the shoulder, and fire exploded across her back. Margot shrieked a sound of pure rage and pain and whirled on Eleanor. "You dare?" Her face was inhuman now. All pretense of beauty burned away. "I will tear you apart slowly, human. I will make you beg." Lucien caught her from behind. His arms locked around her in an embrace that would have been intimate if not for the pure violence in it. "You talk too much," he said coldly. Then he tore her heart from her chest. Margot's eyes went wide, her mouth opening in a soundless scream. She clawed at him weakly, but ash was already spreading from the wound, consuming her from the inside out. In seconds, there was nothing left but dust caught on the wind. Silence crashed down. Lucien stood in the center of the destroyed clearing, covered in blood and ash, breathing hard. The fourth vampire, the one Eleanor had seen earlier, was nowhere to be found. Fled, most likely. When the tide turned, Eleanor's legs gave out. She slid down the cabin wall, her vision graying at the edges. Lucien was beside her instantly, gathering her into his arms with shocking gentleness. "Eleanor, Eleanor, look at me." She forced her eyes to focus on his face, even covered in blood and dirt, even with grief raw in his expression. He was beautiful. "We won," she whispered. "You won. You saved me." His hand cupped her face, and she felt how it trembled. "You foolish, brave, impossible woman. Your brother later." His voice cracked. "I'll mourn later. Right now, I need to make sure you're all right." He lifted her easily and carried her into the cabin, laying her on the narrow bed. His hands moved over her with clinical efficiency, checking her pulse, examining the bite marks on her throat. The wounds had already sealed vampire saliva. She remembered him explaining, had coagulant properties, but she'd lost blood. Enough to make her weak and dizzy. "Rest," he said, pulling the blanket over her. "I need to make sure they're really gone, that the fourth one isn't lurking in the trees. But I'll be close, I promise." Eleanor caught his hand before he could pull away. "I'm sorry about Kieran." His jaw tightened, grief flickering across his features. "So am I." He looked down at their joined hands, her warm and small, his cold and strong. "He was the only family I had left, the only one who understood why I had to leave." "Tell me about him," Eleanor said softly. "Please." Lucien was quiet for a long moment, then slowly sank down to sit beside the bed. He was older than me by 5 years, both in human life and in turning. A faint, sad smile touched his mouth. He used to say I was too idealistic for my own good, that the world would break me if I didn't bend. But you didn't bend, no, and he didn't ask me to. Lucien's thumb moved absently over her knuckles. When I challenged the blood pact, when I broke from the house, Kieran stood before the night court and spoke in my defense. It cost him dearly. House Ashford was humiliated, weakened, but he never blamed me. He just said, his voice cracked. He said that honor mattered more than power, that he was proud of me. Tears burned Eleanor's eyes. He sounds like a good man. He was, better than I deserved. Lucien looked at her, and she saw the depth of his grief, the weight of 30 years of exile suddenly made permanent. And now he's gone. Because of me. Because I was too proud to compromise, too stubborn to know. Eleanor squeezed his hand with what little strength she had. He died because House Corvin is evil. Because they kill anyone who stands in their way. That's not your fault, isn't it? No, and he wouldn't want you to think so. She held his gaze. Honor what he believed in, Lucien. Don't dishonor his memory with guilt. He stared at her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. Then he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, cold and gentle and devastating. Thank you, he whispered, for fighting beside me, for giving me what I needed to survive, he shook his head, for seeing me as something more than monster. You are more, Eleanor said, so much more. Chapter 8. Aftermath. And Ashes. Eleanor woke to gray dawnlight and the smell of smoke. For a disoriented moment, she thought the cabin was burning, but then memory rushed back. The fire lines, the battle, Lucien tearing Margot's heart from her chest. She sat up slowly, her head swimming. The bite marks on her throat throbbed with a dull ache, and her body felt heavy, wrung out. But she was alive. Lucien sat in the chair by the window, perfectly still, staring out at the destroyed clearing. He hadn't changed clothes. Dried blood, some his, some not, stained his shirt and coat. In the pale morning light, he looked, carved from marble, ancient and weary. How long was I asleep? Eleanor's voice came out rough. He turned, and she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. 6 hours. I would have let you sleep longer, but we need to leave soon. Leave? The fourth vampire escaped. They'll report back to what's left of House Corvin. He stood, moving to the table where he'd laid out their meager supplies. We have maybe a day before they send reinforcements. This place isn't safe anymore. Eleanor pushed back the blanket and stood, ignoring the way her legs trembled. Where will we go? There's a safe house to days north. Neutral ground, held by vampires who left the house system years ago. He glanced at her. They'll shelter us. For a price. What kind of price? Information, usually. Favors. Nothing that would compromise you, he added quickly, seeing her expression. But we'll need to negotiate carefully. Eleanor moved to the basin and splashed water on her face, the cold shocking her fully awake. In the cracked mirror above it, she caught sight of herself, pale, bruised, with livid marks on her throat. She looked like someone who'd survived a war. Perhaps she had. I need to tell you something, Lucien said quietly. He'd moved closer, standing just behind her. About what happened last night. About the feeding. Eleanor turned to face him, her heart picking up speed. All right. When a vampire feeds from a human with consent, particularly in a moment of high emotion or danger, it can create, he struggled for words, a connection. Temporary, usually. You might feel echoes of my emotions for a few days. Dreams, perhaps. It will fade. And you? What will you feel? His jaw tightened. The same. Maybe more. You gave me your blood freely, offered it to save me. That kind of gift. He looked away. It matters. More than you know. Eleanor studied his profile, the tension in his shoulders. Are you saying we're bonded? Not permanently. Not unless we. He stopped, shaking his head. It doesn't matter. The point is, you might experience things that feel intrusive. I want you to know I didn't intend that. I would never, Lucien. She touched his arm, making him look at her. I chose to offer my blood. I chose to help you. If there are consequences, I accept them. You don't understand what you're accepting. Then explain it to me. He was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with something. Finally, a blood bond, if completed, ties to people together. The vampire can sense the human's location, their emotions, sometimes their thoughts. And the human can sense the vampire the same way. It's intimate, invasive. His eyes met hers, dark with warning. It's forever. Eleanor's breath caught. But we're not fully bonded. You said it was temporary. For now. But if I fed from you again, if you offered again, he stepped back, putting distance between them. I won't do that to you, Eleanor. I won't tie you to me permanently. You deserve freedom, not eternal connection to someone like me. Someone like you, she repeated. You mean someone who risks his life to protect humans? Who breaks from his house rather than participate in evil? Who mourns his brother and fights with honor? Someone who's killed? Who will outlive you by centuries? Who can never give you a normal life? His voice went rough. You deserve sunlight and safety, and someone who can grow old with you. Not this, not me. The rejection stung more than Eleanor expected. She turned away, focusing on gathering their supplies to hide the sudden burn of tears. I see, Eleanor, no, you're right. This was always temporary. She kept her voice steady, professional. We should pack. Leave before they come back. She felt him watching her, felt the weight of words and said. But he didn't argue, didn't push. He simply began helping her pack with efficient, silent movements. They worked side by side as the sun climbed higher, and Eleanor tried not to think about how natural it felt, how right. Tried not to remember the warmth of his hand on her face, the desperate gratitude in his eyes when she'd offered her blood. Tried not to feel the echo of connection still humming faintly between them. By midday, they were ready. Lucien had salvaged what he could from the destroyed clearing, a sword he'd apparently hidden in the trees weeks ago, supplies from a cache Eleanor hadn't known existed. He moved with purpose, but she noticed how he avoided looking directly at her, how careful he was not to touch her accidentally. Distance. He was already building distance between them. We'll travel by day, he said, shouldering the pack. I'll be weaker, but it's safer. Most vampires won't expect it. Eleanor nodded, slinging her own smaller bag across her shoulders. The weight of it pulled at her tired muscles, but she didn't complain. They set out north through the pines, following a path only Lucien could see. He led, and she followed, and the silence between them grew heavy with everything unspoken. Hours passed. The forest thinned, then thickened again. Eleanor's legs ached, her throat throbbed, and exhaustion dragged at her with every step. But she pushed on, refusing to slow them down. Finally, as afternoon shadows lengthened, Lucien stopped. We need to rest. You're ready to collapse. I'm fine. You're pale as death and swaying on your feet. He gestured to a fallen log. Sit. Drink some water. We'll continue at dusk. Eleanor wanted to argue, but her legs made the decision for her. She sank onto the log gratefully and accepted the water skin he offered. The liquid was cool and clean, and she drank deeply. Lucien remained standing, scanning the trees with restless vigilance. Even weakened by daylight, he radiated alertness, that predatory awareness that never fully dimmed. Why did you really break from your house? Eleanor asked suddenly. The full truth. He looked at her, surprised. I told you. The blood-packed no. I mean, why did you care? You're a vampire. You've killed. Why did it matter to you what House Corvin did? Lucien was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to sit beside her on the log, not close, but near enough that she could see his face clearly. Because I remember being human, he said quietly. I remember what it felt like to be hunted, to be prey, to be helpless. His hands curled into fists. I was turned against my will, Eleanor. Attacked in an alley and drained to the edge of death. My maker gave me a choice: die slowly and in agony, or accept the turn and live forever as what I'd feared most. Eleanor's chest tightened. What did you choose? Life, or what passes for it? He stared at his hands. I was 26 and terrified, and didn't want to die. So I said yes, and I've regretted it every night for 2 centuries. Why? Because I became the thing I feared. Because I had to learn to hunt, to kill, to survive by taking from others what was taken from me. He looked at her, and she saw the weight of centuries in his eyes. The consent law exists because of vampires like me, those of us who remember the horror of having choice stolen, who refuse to perpetuate that theft. Eleanor reached out slowly and placed her hand over his. His skin was cool, but no longer cold, warmed slightly by her blood still flowing through him. You're not a monster, Lucien. You're someone who survived something terrible and chose to be better than your trauma. He stared at their joined hands, his expression unreadable. You keep seeing good in me that I don't possess. I see what's there. You're the one refusing to look. He turned his hand over, threading his fingers through hers. The gesture was tentative, almost hesitant, as if he expected her to pull away. She didn't. They sat like that as daylight faded. 2 people who'd survived horror and found something unexpected in each other. Neither spoke, but Eleanor felt the connection between them strengthening, deepening. Despite Lucien's attempts to maintain distance, whatever came next, they would face it together. She was certain of that. Now, Chapter 9. The night lessons. They traveled through the night, Lucian's strength returning as darkness deepened. Eleanor walked beside him, no longer following, but matching his pace. Her body had adjusted to the rhythm. Walk, rest briefly, walk again. The forest felt less threatening now, more familiar, though she knew that comfort was dangerous. Near midnight, they stopped at a small stream. While Eleanor refilled their water skins, Lucian kept watch from a higher vantage point, his silhouette dark against the star-pricked sky. When she joined him, he'd built a small fire, barely more than coals, enough for warmth, but not enough to be seen from a distance. Tell me about the night court, Eleanor said, settling beside the fire. If we're going to survive in your world, I need to understand its rules. Lucian regarded her thoughtfully. Most humans never learn these things. It's safer not to know. I'm past safe. She met his eyes. Teach me. A faint smile touched his mouth. All right, but understand this knowledge makes you valuable to some vampires and dangerous to others. I'll take that risk. He settled across from her, firelight casting shadows across his features. The night court meets 4 times a year at the old cathedral in Prague. Every major house sends representatives. They settle disputes, enforce the ancient laws, and maintain the veil, the secrecy that keeps our existence hidden from the human world. What happens if the veil breaks? War, between vampires and humans, and among vampires themselves. His expression darkened. It nearly happened during the Revenant Wars. Humans started noticing the disappearances, the bodies. The court created the consent laws to prevent exposure, to force us back into shadow. Eleanor absorbed this. So the laws aren't about morality. They're about survival. Yes, though some of us have made them about morality too. He stirred the coals with a stick. The court is divided into 3 factions: the traditionalists, who want to maintain absolute secrecy and minimal human contact; the progressives, who think we should integrate more carefully with human society; and the isolationists, who want us to retreat completely, create our own separate civilization. Which faction was House Ashford? Pain flickered across his face. Progressive. We believed in coexistence, in honoring humanity even as we lived outside it. He paused. House Corvin is traditionalist. They see humans as resources to be managed, not people to be respected. And what are you, now that you have no house? Lucian looked at her, the firelight reflecting in his gray eyes. Undefined, free, dangerous to the established order. A bitter smile. The court tolerates rogues as long as we follow the laws and don't interfere with house business. But I interfered. I challenged a blood pact. That makes me a threat they can't ignore. Eleanor leaned forward. Is there any way to clear your name? To make the court listen? I'd need proof that House Corvin broke the laws first. Evidence of consent violations, unsanctioned killings, breaches of the veil. He shook his head. But any witnesses are dead, or too afraid to speak. And the court doesn't overturn blood pacts without overwhelming cause. Then we find cause. Eleanor's voice was firm. There has to be someone who knows what Corvin has done. Someone who'll talk. Eleanor, you gave up everything for principle. Lucian. Don't tell me you're going to hide forever. She held his gaze. Fight. Make them see the truth. He stared at her, something shifting in his expression: surprise, admiration, something warmer she couldn't name. You're relentless. I'm invested. She smiled slightly. You're not the only one with nowhere else to go. If we're both outcasts, we might as well be outcasts with a purpose. And if we fail? If the court condemns us both, then we fail together. Eleanor's voice softened. But at least we'll have tried. Lucian was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved around the fire to sit beside her, close enough that she could feel the coolness radiating from him, could see the conflict warring in his eyes. You make it sound simple, he said quietly. But this world I'm bringing you into, it's cruel and ancient and doesn't forgive mistakes. If you stay with me, you'll be marked, known, hunted. I'm already marked. Corvin knows my face. There are other houses. Worse houses. His hand lifted as if to touch her face, then dropped. I can't protect you from everything, Eleanor. And the thought of you hurt because of me. Stop. She caught his hand, holding it between both of hers. Stop trying to protect me from my own choices. I know the risks. I'm choosing anyway. Why? The word came out raw, almost desperate. Why would you choose this? Choose me? Eleanor looked at him, this ancient, deadly, heartbreakingly honorable creature who'd fought beside her, trusted her, shown her more honesty than anyone in her old life ever had. Because when I look at you, I don't see a monster, she said softly. I see someone who fights for what's right, even when it costs everything. Someone who mourns his brother and honors his enemy's courage. Someone who, she hesitated, then pushed forward. Someone who makes me feel less alone than I've felt in years. Lucian's breath caught an unnecessary gesture, purely human reflex. Eleanor, I can't give you a normal life. Can't give you children or safety or growing old together. All I can offer is danger and darkness and a connection that will complicate everything. I don't want normal. Her voice strengthened. Normal was being betrayed by family. Normal was running until I had nowhere left to go. This, she gestured between them. This is the first thing that's felt real since my world fell apart. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. She moved closer, closing the distance between them. I'm saying I want to fight beside you. Learn your world. Help you clear your name. She paused, her heart hammering. I'm saying I trust you. Completely. Lucian's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. If I allow myself to want you, I won't be able to let go. The bond is already forming, Eleanor. One more feeding, one more exchange, and it becomes permanent. Then teach me what that means. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Teach me everything. The laws, the houses, the politics. Make me your partner, not your burden. You were never a burden. His forehead touched hers, and she felt the coolness of his skin, the tremor running through him. You're the bravest thing I've encountered in 200 years. They stayed like that, suspended in the moment, the fire burning low between them and the forest holding its breath around them. Eleanor felt the echo of connection singing through her veins, his grief, his longing, his fierce protectiveness, all tangled with her own emotions until she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. The safe house is another day's travel, Lucian said finally, pulling back, though his hand remained on her face. When we get there, I'll introduce you properly to vampire society, teach you the protocols, the dangers. His eyes searched hers. But know this, once you enter that world fully, there's no going back to your human life. Even if you leave me, you'll be forever changed. Good, Eleanor said firmly. I want to be changed. The person I was before let herself be destroyed by other people's lies. The person I'm becoming. She smiled. She fights back. Lucian's expression softened into something that might have been pride. Yes, she does. He stood, offering his hand to help her up. Eleanor took it, letting him pull her to her feet. His hand lingered in hers, cold and strong and steady. Come on, he said. I'll teach you the first lesson as we walk. The most important rule of vampire society. What's that? His smile was sharp, dangerous, beautiful. Trust no one completely, except, perhaps, the person you've chosen to bleed for. Chapter 10. The Shoiseth safe house appeared at dawn, a stone cottage hidden in a grove of ancient oaks, wards shimmering faintly around its perimeter. Lucian paused at the boundary, his hand raised in a complex gesture. Eleanor couldn't follow. Announcing ourselves, he explained quietly. Walking through wards uninvited is unpleasant. A moment later, the door opened. A woman stood framed in the threshold, tall, with silver-threaded black hair and eyes like polished onyx. Old vampire, Eleanor knew instinctively. Older even than Margot had been, Lucian Ashford. The woman's voice was smoke and honey. I wondered when you'd come crawling back, Celeste. Lucian inclined his head respectfully. I'm seeking sanctuary. For myself and my companion. Those black eyes shifted to Eleanor, assessing. A human. How unexpected. A slow smile. And marked by your bite. Even more unexpected. Eleanor lifted her chin, refusing to be cowed. I'm Eleanor Hartley. I'm with him, clearly. Celeste stepped aside. Come in then, both of you. Let's discuss terms. The interior was elegant in its simplicity, dark wood furniture, shelves lined with ancient books, candles burning in silver holders. Eleanor noticed immediately that there were no windows, no natural light. A vampire's dwelling, designed for comfort and safety in a world of daylight. Celeste gestured them to sit, then poured 3 glasses of wine from a crystal decanter. She offered one to Eleanor, who accepted it carefully. To survival, Celeste said, raising her glass. The only thing that truly matters. They drank. The wine was rich and dark, warming Eleanor from the inside. House Corvin is hunting you, Celeste said, without preamble. I heard about Margot's death. Quite the feat, killing one of their senior members. Her eyes glittered. You've made yourself a very valuable enemy, Lucian. I'm aware. He set down his glass. What do you want in exchange for shelter? Information. You challenged the Corvin Ashford blood pact. I want to know why, and what proof you have of wrongdoing. Lucian's jaw tightened. I don't have proof. Not anymore. My witnesses are dead. All of them? All of them. His hands curled into fists. Corvin was thorough. They killed anyone who might testify. destroyed any documentation. Even my brother, his voice cracked. Even Kieran couldn't protect the evidence. Celeste leaned back, studying him. Then you're fighting a losing battle. The Night Court won't overturn a blood pact on the word of a rogue vampire, no matter how noble your intentions. I know, the admission clearly cost him. But I won't stop. I can't. Even if it means your death? Even then, Eleanor had been listening quietly, but now she set down her wine glass with a sharp click. What if there was another way? What if we could prove House Corvin is still breaking the laws? Both vampires turned to look at her. Explain, Celeste said. Eleanor's mind raced, pieces falling into place. They sent revenants after us. Revenants are illegal, right? Created by force turning or breaking consent laws. Yes, Lucian said slowly. But proving they came from Corvin, the fourth vampire escaped. They'll report back, and Corvin will send more hunters. Eleanor leaned forward. What if we don't run? What if we stay here, document everything they do, and present that evidence to the Night Court? Celeste's laugh was sharp and surprised. The human suggests we set a trap for House Corvin. How delicious. It's suicide, Lucian said flatly. Corvin won't send just hunters next time. They'll send an army. Then we make sure we have witnesses. Eleanor looked at Celeste. You're neutral ground. You have connections to other houses, don't you? Vampires who might also want to see Corvin brought down. Celeste's expression shifted, intrigue replacing amusement. You're smarter than you look, little human. Yes, there are those who would relish seeing Corvin humbled. The traditionalist faction has grown too powerful to bold. She tapped one elegant finger against her glass. But it would require perfect timing, perfect execution, and bait, Lucian said, looking at Eleanor with something like horror. Eleanor, you can't seriously be suggesting I'm suggesting we stop running and start fighting. Eleanor stood, her exhaustion burned away by sudden clarity. You've spent 30 years in exile, Lucian. How much longer will you run? How many more people will Corvin hurt while you hide? I'm not hiding. I'm surviving. You're both. She moved to stand in front of him. And I understand why. But your brother died protecting what you started. Don't let that be for nothing. Lucian rose, towering over her, his eyes storm dark. I won't risk you. Not for vengeance, not for justice, not for anything. It's not your choice to make. Eleanor's voice softened. I'm not asking your permission, Lucian. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. You can help me, or I'll do it alone. They stood locked in silent battle, wills clashing as surely as their fight with Corvin had been physical. Finally, Lucian looked away, one hand raking through his hair. You're impossible, he said roughly. I learned from the best. Celeste laughed, genuine and delighted. Oh, I like her. She has fire. She stood, moving between them. Here's my offer. I'll provide sanctuary, send word to sympathetic houses, and help arrange witnesses. In exchange, when this is over, if you survive, you owe me a favor. No questions, no refusal. That's a dangerous bargain, Lucian warned. All worthwhile bargains are. Celeste extended her hand. Do we have an accord? Lucian looked at Eleanor. In his eyes, she saw fear and pride and something deeper, trust, hard won and freely given. He was letting her make this choice, even though it terrified him. Yes, Eleanor said, shaking Celeste's hand. We have an accord. The vampire's smile was all teeth. Excellent. Then let's prepare for war. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Celeste sent messages through channels Eleanor didn't fully understand, vampire networks that moved information faster than any human post. Other vampires began arriving, rogues and house exiles, vampires who'd suffered under Corvin's cruelty or simply wanted to see the balance of power shift. Lucian taught Eleanor everything he could. Vampire hierarchies, court protocols, the subtle politics that governed their world. She absorbed it all, her mind, cataloging details and connections the way she'd once managed her employer's household accounts. At night, they sat together by the fire, and he told her stories of his human life, the brother he'd loved, the city he'd called home, the simple dreams he'd once had before everything changed. She told him about her mother's illness, her sister's betrayal, the quiet devastation of watching her life crumble while everyone looked away. They didn't speak of the bond forming between them, but Eleanor felt it strengthening with each passing hour. She could sense his presence now, even when he was in another room, could feel the echo of his emotions like whispers at the edge of her consciousness. On the third night, she found him standing alone in the garden, staring up at the moon. They'll be here tomorrow, he said, without turning. Celeste's scouts confirmed it. A full Corvin contingent, 8 vampires, maybe more. Eleanor joined him, slipping her hand into his. Then tomorrow we make our stand. I need to ask you something. He turned to face her, his expression serious. If we survive this, if we somehow bring down Corvin and clear my name, what then? What do you want, Eleanor? She studied his face, memorizing every line, every shadow. I want to stay with you, learn your world, be your partner in whatever comes next, even knowing what that means. The bond, the danger, the centuries of complications, especially knowing that. She stepped closer. I told you before, I trust you. That hasn't changed. Lucien's hand came up to cradle her face, his thumb tracing the faded bite marks on her throat. If I offer you immortality, if I ask you to choose the turn, would you accept? Eleanor's breath caught. The question hung between them, massive and terrifying and somehow inevitable. Are you asking? Not yet, but I might, someday. His eyes searched hers. I need to know if that's something you could want. A life with me, measured in centuries instead of years. She thought of her old life, the sister who'd betrayed her, the society that had cast her out, the future that had been stolen. Then she thought of this fighting beside someone who saw her as an equal, building something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Yes, she whispered. Someday, when we're both ready, I could want that. The smile that broke across his face was brilliant and heartbreaking. He pulled her close, his forehead touching hers, and Eleanor felt the bond between them flare bright and certain. Then we survive tomorrow, he said fiercely. Whatever it takes. We survive, and we build that future together. Together, Eleanor agreed. They stood in the moonlit garden, two souls who'd found each other in darkness, and waited for dawn to bring their final battle. Epilogue. A new dawn. 6 months later, Night Court convened in the ancient cathedral as it had for centuries. But tonight, the gathered vampires murmured with unusual tension. Eleanor stood at the edge of the great hall, her hand resting lightly on Lucien's arm, and watched the assembled houses take their positions. She'd learned to read the politics in their placement. Traditionalists clustered on the left, progressives on the right, isolationists maintaining careful distance from both. But tonight, the usual divisions seemed less certain. Tonight everything could change. Nervous? Lucien asked quietly. Terrified, she admitted. But ready. He squeezed her hand, and she felt the reassurance flow through their bond. It had grown stronger over the months, that connection between them not yet permanent, but deepening with each day they chose each other. She could sense his presence like a constant warmth at the back of her mind. Steady and grounding, the evidence they'd gathered lay in Celeste's hands, testimony from 5 vampires who'd witnessed Corvin's consent violations, documentation of unsanctioned killings, proof of revenant creation. The battle at the safe house had been brutal, but they'd captured 3 Corvin vampires alive. Under court examination, they'd broken, confessing everything in exchange for mercy. House, Corvin's representative, stood alone on the floor below, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. Without Margot, without their senior members, the house had crumbled faster than anyone expected. But pride kept them fighting, kept them denying the evidence, even as it mounted against them. The court recognizes Celeste Moreau. Speaker for the Rogues, the chief adjudicator announced. His voice echoing through the vaulted space, Celeste rose with fluid grace, moving to the center of the hall. She wore crimson, a deliberate choice, bold and unapologetic. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner. Honored court, I present evidence of systematic law breaking by House Corvin, forced turnings, consent violations, murder of humans and vampires alike to maintain secrecy and power. She gestured, and vampires brought forward the documents, the testimonies, the proof they'd fought so hard to obtain. I submit that the blood pact between House Corvin and House Ashford was founded on illegal activity and should be dissolved. Furthermore, I move that House Corvin be stripped of its seat and holdings. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Stripping a house of its seat was nearly unprecedented, a death sentence for vampire nobility. The Corvin representative surged forward. These are lies, fabrications from rogues and traitors. The evidence speaks for itself, Celeste interrupted smoothly. Unless you wish to challenge its authenticity before the full court, silence. They both knew any formal challenge would require testimony under court compulsion, and the Corvin vampire couldn't afford that level of scrutiny. The chief adjudicator raised his hand, and quiet fell. The court will examine the evidence. We reconvene in 1 hour. Eleanor released a breath. She hadn't realized she'd been holding. Lucien guided her out of the hall, through corridors lined with centuries of vampire history, to a small antechamber, where they could wait in private. That went better than expected, she said, sinking into a chair. It's not over yet, but Lucien's expression was cautiously hopeful. The evidence is solid. If the court is honest, that's a significant if. Yes, He knelt before her, taking both her hands in his. Whatever happens tonight, I want you to know you did this. You made this possible. Without you, I'd still be running, still alone, still carrying 30 years of failure. Eleanor touched his face, marveling, as she still did, at how natural it felt. We did this, together, he agreed, and kissed her palm, a gesture that had become ritual between them, acknowledgement and promise combined. The hour passed slowly. Other vampires stopped by to offer words of support or caution. Eleanor recognized some from the battle rogues who'd fought beside them, house members who'd secretly sympathized. A network was forming, she realized. A coalition of those who wanted change. Finally, they were summoned back. The chief adjudicator stood at the center of the hall, the other judges arrayed behind him. His ancient face was unreadable as he surveyed the assembly. The Night Court has examined the evidence presented against House Corvin, he began. We find the allegations proven beyond dispute. House Corvin has systematically violated the consent laws, created revenants in violation of our most sacred prohibitions, and murdered to conceal their crimes. He paused, letting the words sink in. Effective immediately, House Corvin is dissolved. Its seat is forfeit. Its members are stripped of house protection and declared rogue. The hall exploded in noise, shock, satisfaction, outrage, all tangled together. Eleanor gripped Lucien's hand tightly, hardly daring to believe it. Furthermore, the adjudicator continued, raising his voice over the din. The blood pact between House Corvin and House Ashford is declared null and void, having been founded on illegal activity. His gaze found Lucien in the crowd. Lucien Ashford, step forward. Lucien moved through the crowd with Eleanor at his side. She felt his tension, the barely controlled hope mixed with fear. Lucien Ashford, you broke from your house and challenged a blood pact, actions that made you rogue and outlaw. However, your challenge has been vindicated. The court offers you a choice. The adjudicator's expression softened slightly. You may reclaim your position as a member of House Ashford, with full rights and privileges restored. Or you may remain rogue, with the court's recognition that your exile was undertaken in service of the laws you were accused of breaking. Eleanor felt Lucien's hand tremble in hers. She knew what House Ashford had meant to him, knew the weight of his brother's memory. This was everything he'd lost, being offered back. I choose to remain rogue, Lucien said clearly, but with gratitude for the court's recognition. Surprise rippled through the hall. The adjudicator tilted his head. You decline restoration to your house? House Ashford died with my brother. What I am now. Lucien glanced at Eleanor, and she saw the future shining in his eyes. What I'm building is something different, something new. The adjudicator studied them both for a long moment, then nodded. So be it. The court recognizes Lucien Ashford as rogue in good standing, cleared of all charges, free to move through court territories without persecution. He raised his voice. This session is concluded. They left the cathedral as the sun was rising, painting the Prague sky in shades of amber and rose. Lucien couldn't see it, he'd retreated to the shadows, but Eleanor stood at the boundary between dark and light and described it to him, painting the dawn with words. Beautiful? He asked, standing behind her in the shade. Beautiful, she confirmed. Like hope, Celeste found them as they prepared to leave the city. You've made quite the impression, little human. Half the court is fascinated by you, the other half terrified. Good, Eleanor said, with a slight smile. Fear and fascination I can work with, indeed. Celeste handed Lucien a sealed letter. From House Thorn. They're interested in an alliance with your new venture. Whatever you're building. Lucien took the letter, surprise crossing his face. House Thorn was isolationist. Things are shifting, Lucien. The balance is changing. You started something tonight that won't easily be stopped. Celeste's smile was sharp. Use it wisely. She disappeared into the morning crowds, leaving them alone. What now? Eleanor asked. Lucien looked at the letter, then at her. Now we build what comes next. A safe place for rogues. A network for those who want to live by honor rather than house politics. He paused. And maybe, someday, a new house. One founded on choice rather than blood. That sounds like a lifetime of work. Several lifetimes. Probably. He stepped closer to the edge of shadow, as close to the dawn as he could safely come. Which brings me to something I've been wanting to ask. Eleanor's heart picked up speed. She knew what was coming, had felt it building through their bond for weeks now. Eleanor Hartley. His voice was soft, vulnerable in a way she rarely heard. I can offer you this life. Decades of building something that matters, fighting battles worth winning, never running again. He held out his hand to her across the boundary between shadow and light. Or I can offer you eternity. Centuries together, bound by more than partnership. A life and existence measured in ages rather than years. The turn, she whispered, only if you want it. Only if you choose freely, with full knowledge of what it means. His eyes held hers. I won't ask until you're certain. Won't pressure or persuade. But I needed you to know the offer stands. Now and always. Eleanor looked at his outstretched hand, then at the dawn spreading across the sky. 6 months ago, she'd been running with nowhere to go, her life in ashes behind her. Now she stood at the edge of something vast and strange and terrifying, a future she could barely imagine. Built on trust and blood and partnership, she wasn't ready yet. Might not be for years. But someday, ask me again, she said softly, placing her hand in his. When we've built this thing you're imagining, when I've lived enough of this life to know what I'd be giving up, she smiled. Then I'll give you my answer. Relief and love flooded through their bond, so strong it nearly staggered her. Lucian pulled her close, careful to keep them both in shadow, and pressed his forehead to hers. However long it takes, he promised. I'll wait.